we have Mark Nelson. Mark is a managing director of Radiant Energy Group, a clean energy consultancy. He has a master's degree in nuclear energy from Cambridge University and has campaigned to save the German nuclear plant from closing since 2017. Okay, thank you very much. And now I'd like to hand over to Brianna.
Thanks, Greg. We've been hearing a lot from everyone about renewables, about different options to get us there. And so if we can go back to the presentation, my first question that I'd like to put on the screen for everyone as well: should nuclear be considered a low carbon energy source that can contribute to the energy transition? Please, Mark.
So one of the things that I've heard around the world is nuclear is not truly low carbon because there's carbon involved in the production. The way this often goes is I might say something like nuclear is zero carbon, and people say, Actually, nuclear has carbon in every part of the process, from the mining to the operation of the nuclear plant. So that raises an interesting question. How low carbon is nuclear, and how does that compare to other well-known low-carbon technologies? Well, I'm happy to say that now that many companies and countries are obsessed with life cycle analyses, we have actual numbers. And obviously, the citation at the moment is "Trust me, bro." If you come up to me and ask me after the debate, I will be happy to prefer the evidence. So, life cycle analysis, what does this really mean? It means that you look at every single thing, cradle to grave, from the mine for the uranium, to the processing of the uranium, to the fuel manufacturing, to the operation of the nuclear plant, to the disposal of the waste. And you can count up every step. We're here in the IAEA pavilion, where it literally is counted up, every single gram of radioactive elements in the world, in the countries that are not the 6 on the UN Security Council and a few others. Everybody else has to tabulate. It makes tabulating life cycle carbon emissions easy. Let me summarize that the current day, with modern mining and enrichment technologies and the way nuclear plants operate, in already built nuclear plants, the life cycle carbon emissions are down to 3 or 4 grams of CO2 per kilowatt hour. We are not currently able to get that low with other famous low carbon technologies like wind and solar. And when solar is installed in countries with very bad solar resources like Germany, the life cycle carbon of solar zooms upwards anywhere from 10 to 40 or even 50 grams of CO2 per kilowatt hour. So if you have something that is about 10 times cleaner than solar, I'd say that would count for us as low carbon energy.
Thank you. I'll stop you there. So we've all heard about major nuclear accidents, Chernobyl and Fukushima. However, we've seen in the intervening years that this technology has changed and has adapted and is used safely by many countries around the world today. So can nuclear be considered a safe technology for future use?
So I'll deal with nuclear waste in just a moment, but the most famous and destructive nuclear accident at Chernobyl did not even shut down Chernobyl nuclear plant. It kept operating as a working power plant for 14 years until it was shut down at significant cost to Ukraine's future under pressure by Germany. So there were workers at Chernobyl protesting the closure of their power plant. They said, look, we've been operating it without an accident since then. We need the electricity. So that goes completely against the image that Europeans have in their mind of how dangerous nuclear must be, right? So they continued to operate. And not only that, that type of reactor continues to operate and power multi-million person cities to this day. I have never once met an anti-nuclear activist who knew that Chernobyl kept operating. I don't know. I would think that would be one of the most important points you could make, that it's a dangerous thing that kept going. That's irresponsible, right? Chernobyl itself kept operating with the plant workers going every day to a job that they loved so much that they protested its closure. Right. So there's something I would note on Chernobyl, which has provided almost all the accident-related casualties in the history of nuclear, but didn't even shut down the plant until Germany gathered up money to pay Ukraine to shut down their own power plant in year 2000, like a millennial gift. Now, a note on nuclear waste. There is almost none of it I have hugged it. I have gone in person. I don't know if you visited nuclear waste. I would give anything to take you on a European trip to go visit nuclear waste. It's open. There's a museum in Netherlands that's a science museum attached to their nuclear waste facility where they don't just have the high level waste, they have the highest part of high level waste, the most dangerous isotopes separated from the nuclear fuel, the most radioactive stuff, very hot for 500 years. And they have a tour where you can walk over it and you can feel the warmth from the floor from the radioactive isotopes. I'd say the Dutch have it managed, and not saying that the Germans are like the best or anything, but if the Dutch can manage it, I think you guys can. You have breweries that are 500 years old, as we mentioned in a talk. You can absolutely manage the safe, secure, and even educational storage of the most radioactive isotopes because there's almost none of it, and we know very well how to manage it. IAEA is a specialist in it. They can tell you the whole process.
Thank you. All right, we'll move to our last question. In what way should nuclear contribute to achieving net zero? We've just discussed other technology options, so I'd like to present the question in terms of an energy mix of the future.
Great. It's almost a cliche at this point, but there are times when the sun doesn't shine, the wind doesn't blow, the sun is rapidly setting over the western horizon here in Egypt. The lights are going to stay on, and part of the reason is that all over Egypt, natural gas plants are firing up, especially here. We're going to have smaller plants that are much dirtier that are going to be firing up to give us all a good experience here in Sharm el-Sheikh. That is the reason, for example, that Egypt is building what will be the largest power plant in Africa. The most high generation power plant that Africa has seen will be coming in a few years outside of Alexandria. Unless we think that that's just ridiculous and our host country is making a terrible mistake, what I think we're finding is that Egypt sees the answer to this question as a resounding yes. The next host country is the UAE, which in a series of 4 years will have turned on enough clean energy to replace 25% of their energy from nuclear. And they are extraordinarily proud of it. Not just that the plants are there, but at the safety they've been able to achieve as a completely new nuclear country in operating a novel technology for themselves with their own trained workers that they have at the controls at the nuclear plant. Nuclear power is extremely safe if we just look at the numbers, but what we've heard today is that numbers can be agreed upon or even made up. So it's important to talk about feelings. Does nuclear feel safe? I've discovered in traveling around the world, even in Germany, that even young Germans who are against nuclear are not scared of nuclear. They may not think it's safe, but they're not frightened of nuclear. Young people at COP are among the next generation of decision makers, and the fact that they are not afraid of nuclear and mostly haven't heard of nuclear explains the conversations I've been having at the desk over there. They come and they say, after they hear about nuclear, I want that in my nation. I'm going to take that to mean that without needing to look at the actual numbers that show that nuclear is extraordinarily safe, like the actual numbers, not the emotions, we're finally seeing young people's hope in the future cause them to believe nuclear is safe without needing to look at the data that proves it. So yes, I think nuclear is an outstanding safe technology for the future.
Unfortunately, we will do have closing statements, so please, if you've got some response, you can incorporate it in your 2-minute closing remarks.
First of all, thank you, Tobias, for coming into the Lion's Den, and we saw an unfriendly audience, and it's very brave of you, and I appreciate it, and I hope we stay in touch. I must say that I've heard the heat versus electricity thing, and I laugh until I cry because Germany's entire electrification plan is using electricity to replace heat, which of course nuclear plants provide both heat if you wanted them to and electricity. So to say that the problem is heat and then to say we need heat pumps running off of solar at night in the winter, well, nuclear plants run that heat from the heat pumps. When the energy ministry came out with that preposterous lie, I was baffled as to how Germany had allowed itself to get in a position where energy ministers don't even know energy and they make up fake things like, let's electrify heat, but nuclear can't provide heat, only gas, but also solar can electrify heat, but not and they get himself into knots trying to lie about the nuclear plants. So it's absolutely physically untrue from an engineering standpoint. It just can't be. So now that I've used up half my response with my pet peeve, the electrification of heat being said, you can't do it with nuclear electricity for ideological reasons, I'll say my closing statement. I am looking at the audience here, and it is extraordinary. I think we have people from Jamaica, from Nigeria, I see you. I see plenty of young folks from Egypt, from the United States, from around the world. I think that their presence and their attention, I haven't seen anybody on phones. I think that says that you are fascinated by this issue and that you probably believe that there's something for you in nuclear energy, but you're here at the biggest climate conference in the world because you believe in making a better world. So although Tobias said he wants a better world, that means no nuclear, I think the presence of the audience itself is a stronger statement than anything I could say. Look around you, you believe in a better world. And I think from the early voting, you say you believe in nuclear. I can't wait to build that world with you. And thank you for coming to this debate.
Unfortunately, we're out of time. So we'll do 5 minutes of questions, and please keep them to the point.
Thank you, guys. So to you, my question is, how democratic is the nuclear debate in Europe? Who wants the nuclear waste buried in their backyard? What's the kind of engagement? And if I can get a clarification on blue hydrogen and nuclear, what's the difference now? Thank you, guys.
Yes, great question. On the nuclear waste, and I'll keep it short, I've been to absolutely beautiful nuclear waste facilities that are beloved by communities and visited by school children. That is the standard of excellence we must set as young people involved in nuclear. That is what we must deliver if we expect people to like it. Beautiful, interesting, and most importantly, accessible nuclear waste facilities that you can go for yourself and see. And then if you decide as a leader of your community that works for you, then you can go for it. That is a democratic process in the countries that have pursued it so far, where towns have competed aggressively to host the facility because they want the jobs and the prestige that comes along with it. Finland has one open. A few other countries are working on them. Netherlands has already developed a beautiful one. We can talk about it after this. Thank you for the question.
For the last question, I have to give it to the woman who jumped up when we asked about questions. So please.
Why is it a nuclear against renewables discussion? You're saying Africa needs energy now. That is absolutely true. And solar and wind, particularly solar, are playing a role. But Africa will have 2.5 billion people by 2050. Right? And if we're going to meet the demand for those people, we need to build now. So yes, nuclear is not going to meet the demand of electricity in Africa now. That doesn't mean it can contribute in 2050. It doesn't mean if we build nuclear, we can't build renewables. In fact, we'll probably need that renewables plus nuclear plus carbon dioxide removal and all these things, right? It's not a zero-sum game. And that seems to be the discussion I hear from renewable activists and nuclear activists.
To try to be quick about this, estimates for the war in Ukraine are the low hundreds of thousands. Estimates for underdevelopment, you mentioned Africa with a population nearly 1 billion. We're looking at on the order of a few 100K per year from underdevelopment diseases. Depending on what you include, it can be higher to the low millions. And that'd be an annual basis from water, air pollution from dirtier energy, lack of opportunity, leading to lower growth, lower medicine, all that. So that would then compare to all nuclear accidents. Obviously, we would, just like there was a factor of 10 different somehow in your outlier numbers for emissions for nuclear, we would probably disagree on the deaths from nuclear. It comes out to very low per terawatt hour difference, but we're looking at the very low hundreds for deaths from nuclear plant operations, probably the mid hundreds for construction of nuclear plants. And then in terms of accidents from waste, there's been one lethal accident that I know of in Japan from a reprocessing plant to separate out the waste streams. That happened a number of years ago, and I think 1 or 2 people may have died. But otherwise, in terms of the spent fuel that Tobias is so worried about the million years, we, as far as I can tell, and I've looked long and hard for any example, I want to know it, no one has been killed by the handling of high-level spent nuclear fuel, which is the most extraordinary story of waste management in any part of the energy sector in the world. So I think those are my answers on the numbers for your question. Great question. In terms of the nuclear versus renewables, I admit sometime I can get passionate about nuclear, and it is absolutely true that solar and wind can be built very rapidly, and they are built very rapidly. I will say this about nuclear. Nuclear's perhaps greatest weakness is that it requires our best people, our best effort, and it requires focus over a decade or more. The difference, I suppose, is that I absolutely think that if we have challenges ahead of us, like building a better world or solving climate change, the least we can do is our best over a decade or 2 decades. A lot of young people need those decades for your career. And there's a reason why so many young people got involved in the UAE nuclear program, even though it was as far away as you said, 10 years, 15 years. Next year's COP27 will be primarily clean nuclear electricity from young people who built a nuclear plant and operate it outside of the convention center. That answers the question for me about cooperation. It's going to be a solar and nuclear powered conference, and I, for one, am looking forward to it.
Thank you all for joining us. It was a very lively discussion, and I hope you all enjoyed the rest of the week here in Sharm el Sheikh.